So good.
It's all good. It's all divinely planned. It's perfect, right? We're just writing a script as we go. This is the way life is. And with the topic of inner wisdom, if we tap into that inner wisdom, that is basically being on that autopilot, trusting and knowing that we are guided, that the presence that is existing in and through all things exists in and through us. So I have to say that it's not the first time I screw up, but anyways, it's all good.
Do I have to tell them?
Yeah. There's a list. She could pull that list out. I want to just say, thank you for having me here. Thank you for Reverend Donna for, thinking of me. And before that, I guess it was Vicki Jennings and Reverend David Jennings, who have been dear friends of ours for a long time. I don't know how far we go back. My wife and Vicki have sang together, that they've also supported each other in their own, musical outcroppings and careers. So it's just wonderful to have friends like that. And so with that, I just love the topic when Reverend Donna was talking about wisdom, and I said, whoa, that's cool. I really am into wisdom, because a lot of the training that I do, when I work with business owners, when I do my coaching, this is an area that I deeply explore. And I'm seeing now the turning of the tides even in the business world. Magazines like Forbes magazine, it's probably like 4 articles on intuition. Wow. And this is just this year. Inc. magazine, and as well as other studies. So we're opening this up into a greater world that's out there. And things that we used to not want to talk about, used to whisper about, we can now share. It's our spirituality that's blossoming. So I have a confession to make. As I was working on my speech and I kind of procrastinated and put things off to the last minute, I made a decision yesterday to kind of escape the home and go back to my office and sit there quietly. And number one is to first meditate. That's what I teach before I even go into any creative activity. I just need to be silent. I just need to meditate. I just need to connect. But yesterday was tricky, because on my way to my office, and I was almost there, it was about a quarter of a mile from my office, I had these flashing blue lights behind me. Fear, all this like, oh no, it can't be me, it's going to be the car. And of course, then I'm turning into my office, and of course he turns in with me. So it's like, intuition's shut down. The inner wisdom thing is shut down at this moment. I'm just thinking of very, very nice gentleman, very nice police officer. Walks up to my window, and you know what they always say. They don't tell you why they pulled you over, right? They ask you, do you know why I pulled you over? And I'm like, I don't know, was there a stop sign back there? Or was there a light that I went through? I wasn't speeding. And of course, this police officer with, probably very well gifted with his own psychic talents is like, your registration expired. I'm thinking, wow, this is a psychic cop. Even through that bulletproof vest, his heart chakra or his solar plexus could see into my glove box, and this little piece of paper called my registration was out of date. But then again, it was the sticker that. So we all have this, and sometimes we don't always trust it. It's always there. It's always alive. It's always present. Who here would say they actually have what they would say, they're in tune with their intuition? Go ahead and raise your hand. How many people say that I'm in tune with my intuition? Okay. Well, keep your hand up if you feel the person next to you is in tune with their intuition. See, you're intuitive. You knew that. Isn't that amazing? Part of it is practicing this. And so as we know that these are gifts and tools and talents that we're now becoming awakening to, that we can use and get rid of that nervous mind chatter, unplug from the outside world, and listen and trust, and allow the guidance to help us. We find that ends up being a much easier process, but we get sometimes tangled up in the old ways, looking at that outer world and trying to fix it, and not necessarily addressing the inner world. I know I'm guilty of that too. As much as we talk about it, I do the same thing. And Paul Simon of Simon & Garfunkel, who wrote that song, and we always get together and collaborate on messages and music. And Fani was in Indonesia when she sent me the song, and I said, yes, that's it. And then, of course, I listened to the Hello Darkness part, and I'm like, oh, no, no, no. I don't want to say hello to darkness. What is that? And of course, then as I listened to the song and explored and listened to all the lyrics, Paul Simon, when he was 21 years old, and I really connected to this individual. You know, he's a creative genius, much like all musicians are, much like we all are. We're all creative geniuses. And he had a similar situation to what I experienced. Difficulty with, you know, being around energy, around people, being an empath, or being sensitive to sounds and noises, and not being able to easily quiet the mind. And what his trick was to go to the bathroom. It was the room that he could go to with his guitar and shut off the lights. And there he felt lyrics and music would flow. And this practice kept going on and on. It was his 6th song that he ever wrote. And Hello Darkness. I'm here to talk with you again. So as I listened and I saw that this was the message of this song, this was the one song that he really wanted to get out there and relate to, unfortunately, guess what? It was like 1963, 1964, so this was the highlight of Beatlemania and all this other stuff that was hitting top number 1. And so the Sound of Silence was actually silenced for a while because it didn't come to number 1 until several years later. But that's what he found was his solitude, his presence. And we all need that. We all need our bathroom or our getaway or our place where we can shut off the light and then just be connected. For me, I love group meditations like we did earlier, because I feel if all minds are together and all minds are meditating, that's soothing. But then there's also times when we need to do this in our own life and find a time when we can actually sit quietly and meditate. Oh, when I work with these business owners, they're like, Ron, what are you talking about? Just look at my profit and loss and tell me where I'm at. And I'm like, let's begin with, knowing you. Let's put this all aside and let's begin with knowing you. Quite often I will show up at a business and I'll walk through the door and how's it going? And the business owner is like, it's going great, it's going fantastic. And of course, they got all their employees around there, so they don't want to really admit to some of the things. And later when we will sit down for dinner, granted, there may be a bottle of wine there too, but we sit down for dinner and we start to go in and we start to listen to what is really going on. Where do you see your vision for not just your business, but for your life? Are you waking up every day totally inspired? Or did that die? And why? So this discovery process was the reason why I wrote my book, Getting Unstuck. I wanted to have those inner soul questions that people could sit there with a book and fill in the blank. Too often we get caught up in living a life, in the craziness. And I know we've got, of course, we got 2 kids, they're teenagers, and one's off to college, and it's just work, drive here, drive there, groceries. But sometimes we need to slow down, and we need to contemplate. And we need to ask those questions that we probably haven't asked ourselves since we were a child. And it's not only am I living the life that I feel I want to be living, am I giving? Because we start to get to the point where, yes, the law of attraction, I get it. Been there, done that. We've attracted thousands of things called stuff, parking spaces to homes. But the reality was just like, that wasn't what made us happy. I know the law works. I walk in the faith of the law working. But how can I be of service? Fulfillment comes for me, for many of us. How can we be that Paul Simon of writing those lyrics or whatever that creative activity is for you? How do we express it so we empower and inspire other people? Everybody's got a gift. And sometimes listening to that inner wisdom, that inner voice, and coming aligned with it. And dropping the shoulds. We live in a world of shoulds. You know, from a time this lively child gets to the age 10, they've heard the word no 10,000 times. Imagine that. And then we get molded by those, as a child, we get molded by those people called adults. And of course, I realize I'm doing it now with my own kids. But when we transition and look in and say, what is the desires? What are the things that is birthing within you? How can you show up in the world? How can we tap into the inner wisdom, the inner presence, and how do you want to present yourself to be of service to the world, to make a difference in lives? My wife and I, we own this with a sign business. And you look at the word sign and the word sing, it's the same 4 letters, it's just the G and the N are backwards. And she hated the business. And I could sense that. And she would show up every day, and I kept asking her, what would you love to do? I don't know, hon, but it's not this. Right? And after asking those questions over and over again, we finally actually did go to the Unity in Fort Myers for a while. We actually went to the Center for Spiritual Living in Cape Coral. We began our spiritual practice, and we realized that as we meditated, we journaled, and we put forth, and we started calling this inner wisdom, miracles start happening. One thing leads to another, and my wife is invited to sing, actually at a totally different center, which was ironic. They found out about it, and they said, well, how come you're not singing here? And then, of course, later she meets Vicki, and a lot of things transpired. And now she's, a full-time professional singer and loving what she does. Because for her to not only express her voice, but to get people up and dancing and feeling happy and joyful, that's a true gift, a gift that I don't have, and I don't think you want to hear me sing. And I work with Toastmasters. I work with a group we birthed this new group, which is totally uniquely different. It's called Southwest Florida Speakers. And amazingly, we attract a lot of spiritual speakers. And I look at the fear of public speaking, it's this scary, but if you bridge that fear and you go through that, then that inner voice can really blossom. So we've got writers, we've got poets, we've got speakers, we've got all age groups. And part of it is working with what we call the essence of ourself. Everybody's got a message, everybody's got a gift. Quite often somebody will sign up and they'll say, okay, I want to do this public speaking thing. And they're nervous as crazy. It's like, Ron, where do I start? Grab your journal, meditate. You'll find that messages will come. Stories from the past will come forth. I know I travel a lot. So I'll be sitting in an airplane and all of a sudden somebody will be sharing. Because I'm interested in people and I love listening to stories, and somebody will be sharing and I'm like, that's the speech that I need to deliver. Thank you for that little bit of information you just gave me. So we know that we have these gifts, and tapping into ourselves and asking, what is it that I really want to give? And then trusting the inner voice. So intuition to me came what I discovered at a very, very early age. I was 13 years old, overweight, covered with zits, bullied, didn't have a friend. And instead of going off to summer camp, because I just felt that, hey, I'm having a hard enough time in school here, now I'm going to be sent off to another, environment where this is going to happen all over again. I chose to go to my uncle's farm. My uncle had a dairy farm in Hardwick, Massachusetts. I don't know if anybody's from Massachusetts. Do you know where Hardwick is? Next to where? Next to where? And everybody goes, where? Well, W-A-R-E, where? Where, Mass? And I loved it because it was an environment. I loved, being around animals, being around cows. I loved, I don't know if you've ever gone up and just hugged a cow. It just, to me, it's warm. And to be able to walk the fields, but of course, to be able to work hard too. And then at 13, my uncle put me to work right away. Everything, you know. I eventually got to the point where I could ride tractors. Of course, we didn't have an automatic cleaning system, so I had to shovel gutters. And I had to bale hay, and I loved, you know, being out there sweating in the hot summer sun, working really, really hard. Kool-Aid tasted better. And so what I realized was as I started becoming more present, and I felt the farm allowed me to do that, I felt more in touch with nature. And I think nature is one of those ways where we can tap into the inner wisdom, the inner voice that's there. It livens it up because we're no longer, for me, I was no longer being bullied. I was no longer in that tangled up mind thinking, how do I deal with life? I was more present. I saw calves being born. I saw other animals that we had on the farm. But the thing that came through, which was what I would call my life, everybody has their life moment, their life miracle moment. Here I am, 13 years old, wanting to make my uncle happy, and my job, one of my first jobs, was to grain the cows, which basically meant giving them scoops of grain. We had 45 cows, 45 stanchions. Of course, every stanchion above it had the name of the cow. And when the door opened, the cows came in whatever lineup, they always lined up in their stanchion under their name. I don't know how they knew that, but they had their favorite place. And years later, I went to work on larger commercial farms, and there were no names. It was more like a factory. Get them in, get them out. They had ear tags with numbers, which kind of frightens me because the human race is now, we feel like sometimes we're more of a number or a statistic than we are a name. What he did was he gave me a list, and he says, well, now, Ronnie, this cow right here gets a scoop of grain. This cow right here gets 2 scoops. This cow right here gets a scoop and a half, and went down and wrote this list together. And I don't know the reason behind this. I don't know if it was the amount of milk that they were giving, but he had a plan. They all got the same amount of hay, but when it came to grain, they had different portions. So I had this list, and it was basically on a very small piece of paper, like the half-size pad. And my uncle left. So he left me entrusting to grain the cows. And I got my wheelbarrow, and I went in and I shoveled all this grain into the wheelbarrow, filled it up, walked out to the very first cow. I didn't know what happened to that list. I couldn't find the list. And I'm sitting there and I go, the uncle's gone, you know. And I have no way of knowing, and there's a science behind this. Each one is supposed to eat a certain amount of grain. And of course, as I sat there and I was looking at the first cow, first name, I was trying to guess, because he started with the first cow, I was trying to guess. And what happened was I knew not only that cow, I started knowing exactly each cow. I don't know where it was coming from. And so I grabbed the notepad and I just wrote the name down. I wrote the number, you know, scoop and a half, a scoop. And for me, this was it's the thing that you don't know why, but it's present. And I went and scooped each one, because this was the only thing I could do. Scoop each one to the recipe that I felt that perhaps the divine was speaking to me to give this cow 2 scoops, and the next cow over a scoop and a half, and the next cow over perhaps just a scoop. And of course, I went all the way down, all 45 cows. And when I got to the last one, as I'm scraping the bottom of the wheelbarrow, there's a piece of paper. And of course, I take that piece of paper, my piece of paper, and I look at it, and I'm like, I'm totally blown away. Because of course, I knew something, but I didn't know what. And this put me on this kind of wild goof chase of kind of making me kind of explore spirituality, because we all have these things that kind of set us on this path. And I said, this had to be something. And I was also the kid in the house that kind of, when there was missing objects, ask Ron. And it's a gift sometimes we don't necessarily know that we have, because our entire world can go absolutely crazy, and we're stuck in the entire world, the world of thought, the world of worry, the world of, what am I going to do tomorrow? The world of checking my cell phone and who liked my post on Facebook. We talk about connection. Are we being connected or disconnected when it comes to the smartphone, which is making us dumb? Or the ever activity of having to be glued on something that's called social media or email or whatever, something that's technology, that we all know technology is good for us, but then we need to understand to always come back to present, always come back to that inner wisdom, always trusting that. We call it inner wisdom, but I would say we know as spiritual people that there really is not an inner or an outer. It's just one thing. And sometimes it comes as hunches, right? Sometimes it comes as maybe that you just know it's the wrong move. Don't do this now. My wife and I were closing on a property, and of course, she said, I walked out of that meeting feeling no. I don't want to go into the rest of the story because we learned a lot from that. But we know that inner wisdom is there. But it can also come in sign symbols and synchronicities that you may run into in the outer world. Quite often, a person who's missing love, a dove will show up. The bird of love. There are definitely what we call, when we say the inner wisdom, it's the all that is. It's the larger spectrum. Now, science has also looked at this. If you're familiar with HeartMath, I don't know if anybody's ever been to heartmath.org, but they do a lot of studies around the human heart as a communicating device. It's never been looked at like that. It's always been the brain. It's everything that's going on in the brain, and the brain talks to all the organs, including the heart. Well, the heart basically has the field that can be picked up for quite a long distance from electromagnetic frequencies that they see, that they detect, that's way beyond the brain. They don't necessarily understand it. With the testing that they've done with intuition, this is amazing. This is truly amazing. You can go to heartmath.org and Google this and look at these research. But one of the things they did is took average individuals, people that weren't necessarily any more gifted than another, and they would sit them down in a chair and they put a screen in front of them. And it was like a TV screen. And they hooked them up to all sorts of devices. They would sense the muscular, the tissue of the skin. They were looking for little signals that they could measure, electronic frequencies that they could measure. But they used a simple electrocardiogram to measure the heart. So the frequency of the heart, the actual acceleration of beating, and to be able to measure that. And all they did was they took subjects, they would sit in a chair, and they would put in front of them a variety of pictures. A lot of pictures were calm pictures, something soothing like that. Or a picture of the beach. But every so often there would be a picture that would be kind of difficult. Could stress somebody out, could be disturbing, could be war, or something like that. So they mixed these up. Even the person operating this didn't know the order because it was all random. But what happened was, traditionally what they were thinking was, the picture comes up, the eyes see the picture, it registers on the brain, and guess what? The heart jumps. The only problem was the science wasn't showing that. No matter how random these were, the mysterious thing was even seconds before the picture, seconds. Picture hadn't even been up yet. The heart reacted. How did the heart know that picture was coming? When even the person administering the test didn't know the order because it was all random. We have this inner wisdom, this inner knowledge. And sometimes, as mysterious as it is, we don't necessarily know how gifted we are, how guided we are, how divine we are. As I practice this, I basically take 4 very, very simple techniques. And whether it's with a business owner or somebody that's coming through public speaking or whatever their desire is. And what I do is we basically take and we talk about scheduling a moment in our life that we could repeat, that we can actually unplug. And the thing is, if you do it at the same time every day, again, this is science behind this, that we have what's called a body clock. So when we start to create a habit, like whether it's going to sleep at the same time or eating at the same time, it's amazing how we feel hungry sometimes just because it's the time of day. But we have this natural body clock. And writers know this, authors know this. The one trick that I learned from talking with a lot of authors was if you just take a journal and you were to sit, same time every day, and write. And even if it's saying, I don't know what I'm going to write, I'm just writing because Ron said to write, just dabbling, and you start to do this practice every single day, you start to wake up something inside of you that's relative to your natural clock, and your body is ready to respond, and creativity is there at the moment. So the same thing with meditation. So a lot of times when I'm working with anybody that I'm guiding and I'm coaching, I bring them to the agreement of when is your sacred moment of meditation. Not necessarily you have to meditate this way or that way, but when is the time when you can start to practice? Not whether you're great at it or not, but because we have this cycle that's natural to our body clock, we'll find that it'll start to work for us. The second thing is to talking, asking questions. When we ask questions to our intuition, when we become friends with our intuition, our inner wisdom, it starts to come alive. When we start trusting, when we start saying, how is this serving me? Whatever the situation might be, whether it looks like it's negative or positive, I manifested it. It's in my life. How is this serving me? How can I use this as a gift? You can even ask your intuition, how can I be of better service to the world? It'll tell you. So the practice of the routine of the meditation, as well as asking, treating it like a friend, respecting and knowing it's there, and trusting. And then the other practice, which I love doing, and I encourage everybody, is you can do this with a partner. It's practice what's called reflection and being present. Just deeply listening, asking them the question, and deeply listening. Especially when there's an emotion. Because there's intelligence within emotion. You can actually say, what is that intelligence that's speaking to me through that emotion? My wife laughs, she goes, well, you're the most positive person, and if somebody will come to me with a problem, like one of my kids is like, you know what, it's going to be fine, don't worry about it. Sometimes the better thing is sit and ask. Understand. Because we need to breathe. Everybody needs to express. And there is that divine intelligence that's coming through in that emotion. So being present. And what I found, and this is something, ironically, I was practicing, coaching people, and being present, I felt that was actually helping my own intuitive gifts. Just because I was present for somebody else. So practicing that. And the last thing is trusting it. We know everything that speaks to us and everything that's guidance that we see as the inner wisdom. If we don't trust or take action relative to it, then we're finding ourselves not really using our inner wisdom at all. How many times have you had a situation, I knew it and I shouldn't have done that, right? We always have those afterthoughts. I had that gut feeling that I just knew I probably shouldn't have made that step forward, or I knew I should have done this and somebody else went ahead and did it and whatever. So trusting and taking action relative to that trusting. So, as I conclude, know that this divine presence is within you. It guides you, it walks you. It's this thing that creates the magnificence of our planet. It is the power that's within everything. As we see, even in the business world, as that's blossoming, you get people that, like Warren Buffett, that talk about his meditation practice. You know, people like Elon Musk saying, ideas come through the silence. Imagine that. We all have that creative genius within us. We all walk with that presence. We all have the ability to tap in, tune in, and connect with it. And to be able to trust. Thank you.